Major tech changes will hurt the for-hire trucking market within the next decade. Where are the drivers going? Look no further than the warehouse. We do 5 good minutes with Craig and Ben from CDL Marketing on driver retention. Then, LNG carriers crack open the Northern Sea route, and the U.S. has borne the Jones Act long enough. I'm JP.
And I'm Chad.
And we discuss all these topics and more on this week's episode of What the Truck.
JP,
what's going on?
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July, dude.
I mean, even though it was, a couple days ago now.
Right. It was fun.
I'm still feeling independent, still feeling free.
I'm not paying any taxes on my stamps. I'll tell you that.
Well, here's to old glory. And what are you drinking? Should I ask? It's kind of hidden there. So,
I'm sampling the lovely bouquet of Bell's Two Hearted.
Is it really a bouquet? It's just one hop.
It is when I smell it.
I, similarly and by contrast, am drinking a Promenade by local Chattanooga brewery, Hutton and Smith.
Ooh, a Promenade.
Promenade. It has, to me, a similar grain bill to your your kind of balanced malty feel of the Big Two Hearted.
Nice.
But it is a NEPA, a New England IPA.
Yes.
And they like to go crazy on the hops.
Mm-hmm.
Does it really need hops?
So do they put it at the beginning or the end of fermentation?
Let's see. I think the traditional way, and I think the way that they probably did it, is after fermentation happens.
I see.
So that like right after the dry hopping occurs, it's fresh, it's floral, juicy, all those things, and then you put it into rotation, and it's juicy and floral and a true bouquet, I must say.
Thank you, Kanye. Very cool.
Okay. Today our theme is we're
kind of all over the place.
A little bit all over the place as we round up the headlines each week. Though, ladies and gentlemen, we try to bring it into focus for you somehow, a listening point, a theme of sorts, and one of them is there's a lot of stuff like I guess JP overall it's sort of like as tech is disrupting things, and I don't know if you heard the thunder in the background right there. I heard that, so that's an omen.
It was a dark and stormy night.
There's disruption in tech, and it is impacting drivers, their jobs, a little bit now, and a whole lot more in the future.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be talking about we're bringing some maritime into today's podcast.
We are. We have 2 stories about maritime.
So it's exciting. It's exciting.
All right. Well, so our CEO, Craig Fuller, wrote this really cool article about challenges to the for-hire trucking market in, I think, 3 different areas.
Yeah, he calls them, we're calling them the 3 A's, AAA. Kind of sounds cool. They all, sort of affect retail in one way or another, but it is Amazon, autos, and agriculture.
Yes.
Those are the 3 different areas. So it's not like an industry thing. It's not autonomous, as one might have guessed of one of the A's.
But autos is related to the autonomous, right? Because the thing, so Craig wrote this, and he was saying that there are these 3 big verticals: automotive, agriculture.
And literally with the agriculture, it's going to be vertical growing. So it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, and he's kind of saying that. So these are big sources of freight for the trucking industry, and he thinks that because of some secular tech-driven changes going on in those segments, that it poses a bit, kind of a downside risk for trucking. So one of these is the auto, and what Craig was talking about with autos, sorry, do you have the numbers in front of you? But basically,
Yeah.
the idea is that if
By 2030, Tony Seba believes that 95% of passenger miles will be on, as you pointed out a minute ago, electric and autonomous vehicles, and the U.S. automotive fleet will shrink 80%.
yeah, so that's the real kicker here, is that the idea is that with autonomous vehicles that can drive themselves,
Transportation as a service,
that you will need far fewer cars. I mean, if you look at any city, any downtown of a city, for most of the day, everyone's cars are just kind of, sitting there, not doing anything. And they could be driving people around. And the idea is that if they were autonomous, you could serve all of the transportation needs of a population with far fewer vehicles. I personally don't think it will be an 80% reduction. That's far too much in my view, because I think you still have to have enough vehicles to take everyone.
That would be dramatic.
You have to have enough to cover the surges, right? So the rush hour, the commutes, all that sort of thing. You might not be using those cars during the day.
But this is by 2030, so we're talking about
2030, but
11 and a half years or so.
Yeah, I mean,
by that decade.
I know that Singapore did a study to see how many fewer cars they could get away with on their roads if they were all autonomous.
Wow, really?
And and it was like 30% less. So 80% seems like a lot. Who knows?
Yeah,
but the takeaway is that if the automotive industry shrinks because people are using fewer cars more, then that all of those, and we're not just talking about car carriers, car haulers, but we're talking about the whole supply chain of parts.
Yeah, it's kind of a broader
all of
look
these
through the auto lens.
Yeah, so if we're making less cars, trucks will be hauling fewer car parts.
With Amazon, being today, e-commerce, only represents 13% of all retail sales.
Right.
It's 21% of all trucking freight. It's going to continue to grow, and over that time, Amazon. I mean, the long and short of it is that as they consolidate and as they bring things into their own network, there's going to be less for hire opportunities. It looks like they Amazon could look kind of more like a FedEx, a combination of for hire line haul carriers and leased on owner operators.
Right.
It could look something like that. Or Forward Air's airport to airport owner operator network with scheduled line haul owner operators between the terminals. But anyway, the long and short of it is there's just going to be a phase out of the traditional way that we're seeing the for hire market. It's going to reduce. Is it bad news necessarily? Is it bad news? A lot of people, I guess it is. I mean, I
don't necessarily think this is an unmitigated negative because it might be a reduction of opportunities for the for hire market, but it's saying that there's going to be either they're going to be a dedicated fleet, or they're going to have independent contractors drive this stuff. It may not be giant shippers putting as many loads out on the spot market, but there will be. It's not necessarily saying that there's going to be a net reduction in jobs for trucker drivers because of this. They'll just be sort of counted differently. They won't necessarily be for hire. They might be working for Amazon or working for one of Amazon's partners.
Right, or doing, I guess, shorter hauls with agriculture as things are grown.
So let's talk about the agriculture. Yeah.
There is literally a thing called vertical farming, but it's indoor and vertical agriculture. Will impact e-commerce, and there's just it's a fascinating dense article that Craig's written, and I encourage people to check out all of it. But basically, freight costs of the final product cost, they tend to be much higher in right now in agriculture, counting for as much as 70% 5% of the final cost of the
Whoa.
product. And so I guess the good news in a way is that, by not having to worry about climate and geography as a factor of where crops are produced, and companies can locate anywhere, these ag tech startups are, starting to control everything in these indoor settings, where, it's basically the food could be better for us. And there's lower labor cost, and if it's produced locally, but the long and short of it is there will be less of these long line haul opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, I think the upside is basically that executives from Kroger and Walmart are saying that in the near future, and they're actually already transitioning to this model, but basically they want to grow food closer indoors vertically or whatever, and I mean, I think shorter supply chains, hopefully cheaper produce, as you said, it's probably more nutritionally valuable because as soon as you pick a fruit or a vegetable, it's and you start shipping it starts losing its whatever vitamins. I don't know. Is that true?
I think there's some data in the article that speaks to it. We should have Craig on for 5 good minutes coming up soon, and he can extrapolate on some of this very stuff.
Right.
Why don't we think about where are the drivers going? And we look no further than the warehouse. Well, what's interesting, what we stumbled upon by looking at our sonar data, our warehouse employment sonar data. We just kind of looked at it. We looked at it a number of ways, 7 years over a 5-year period. And we showed that at least over the 5-year period, trending, back near the Great Recession time. But is that, since then, you've seen warehouse employment, of all things, up 46%. While retail, we did that as a comparison, retail's up 7% in that time, and trucker employment is only up 6% in that time, which, you might think it would be up a lot more with the economy jamming like it is comparatively over that time. And also if the trend holds in the next 7 years, warehouse employment will be larger than truck transportation.
Wow.
Yeah.
7 years?
In the next 7 years, because currently the sectors are about 1.02 million for warehouse and 1.475 million for trucking. So right now it still outnumbers warehouse employment. And so what we're finding, this is interesting, I think, about this story and about looking at some of this stuff. We're hearing a lot of stuff about in warehouse, about how everything's going autonomous, and JD.com, just figured out how to, employ a warehouse, that, with 4 employees and 200,000 robots or something,
4 employees and 200,000 shipments fulfilled every day.
Thank you. Not actual robots, but they're moving fast and efficiently, and that's kind of the thing. It's but so what they're finding with these warehouses and all there is a warehouse education and research council, and their report showed that actually technology is not taking over jobs. What warehouse manage, they're not anticipating even over the next decade that warehouse people working in employed in warehouses will be replaced by technology. There is now efficiencies in organization are being increased, and they are aided by technology, but lots of people are going to the warehouse as I guess the logistics and the e-commerce intensifies.
There are more warehouses. They're averaging smaller square footage. They're located closer to population centers where people live, and therefore where people want to work. I don't really know about the wages for warehouse jobs, but I mean, I would think that being home every night is better than not.
But I mean, there's not a direct correlation. Like over the road, drivers aren't necessarily those are the actual people going to the warehouse. But we do see disruption in what we've been seeing for decades. And we see some evolution in trends and where jobs are going.
Yeah.
And it's,
It's pretty amazing how quickly it's grown.
things are happening fast. And, the trucker population is aging. And, we've talked, on probably about every podcast about the how it's a tough job. The capacity crunch is intense.
Right.
Like whether or not they're getting higher wages. They don't like to be, like most people don't like to be away from home. They want to have a life.
Right.
It often takes a special breed of person that can, put in those hardcore miles week after week.
Right. Yeah. It's, and I think just I think those stats really kind of speak to what kinds of jobs people are willing to do.
Yeah.
What industries are changing the most. Clearly, there has to be some kind of economic incentive for people to want to do warehouse jobs, if they're being able to add that many people year after year after year. So it's I don't know, it's really interesting. It's kind of surprising, and it's definitely speaks to some kind of transformation in the economy.
Yeah, and this all leads us into our 5 Good Minutes interview that we had with Craig and Ben of CDL Marketing, and let's check this out.
All right.
Okay, so we are here at Transparency 18 with Craig and Ben. Craig, what's your Craig Jablonski and Ben Ani of CDL Marketing, and CDL Marketing.
Yeah, so they are digital experts with a passion for trucking. They represent carriers and try to change the way recruiting departments generate their applications and build their driver pipeline. So they're all about sourcing the industry, solving the capacity crunch, fixing driver retention, and finding really top performing drivers.
Some huge pain points to address. We're so excited to have you guys on the show. Thanks for being willing to go to run through the gauntlet of the 5 Good Minutes. Do you think you guys can do that?
No, we're happy to. We appreciate you having us.
All right, man. Absolutely. So are you guys ready for our hard-hitting questions?
We're ready. Bring it on.
All right. Ready or not, here we go.
Okay, so what's the single biggest challenge you guys face in the industry with attracting quality drivers? Is it in your control? Is it out of your control? And what is up to you guys to determine, the carriers?
Yeah, I'm going to spin this a little bit. I think it's really our customers. What challenges do they face, right? We kind of have the same challenges, and really, today it's a driver's market, right? These drivers have many choices, a lot more choices than they had years ago, especially new drivers, right? Today you've got, big private fleets competing with the for-hires and offering home daily routes, paying 60, 70 grand a year, and these opportunities weren't available 5 years ago. So the biggest challenge right there, more competition, drivers want more home time. That's like the number one thing. We survey our network of drivers, and that's what they all want. More so than pay. Pays a close second, but people want to be home. So
yeah, that's a big thing. Just like Ben said, 5 years ago, we didn't have the Cisco Foods and Domino's Pizzas of the world. They weren't in this whole driver recruiting capacity, right? They had drivers. They have very attractive jobs. Now they're struggling too. So now they're in the market fighting for the same pool of drivers that all these big carriers who have been in recruiting for years and years and years are facing. So you have a smaller driver pool and now greater competition amongst carriers who are all trying to offer better pay and sign-on bonuses and more home time and this, that, and the other thing. So.
Wow, yeah. Well, we've heard it reported that this year I think TMW, Damon Langley's TMW said that we added about 19,000 new drivers this very year, but unfortunately with so much churn and demand, we're still about 50,000 short. First of all, does this seem like an accurate assessment to you? And do carriers need to do a better job at creating realistic expectations and a positive company culture to keep drivers to stop so much churn?
I think that's you hit the nail on the head. I think it's managing the expectations, right? And drivers, it's interesting, right? Years ago, drivers could not jump ship as much as they do today. A carrier wouldn't hire you if you had, 5 jobs in the last 2 years. Well, today, that's not really the case, right? They need drivers more than ever, and they're willing to kind of overlook that. But I think it's really about managing the expectations. If a driver thinks they're going to be home a certain amount of time or get paid a certain amount of time, the carriers have to deliver on those promises, right? And most drivers, when they leave, it's going to be in those first 6 to 8 months, and it's because the job wasn't anything what they thought it would be. So if you set the right expectation, treat the driver like I would treat a new customer, right? Especially those first few months is crucial. Offer the right training. I think it helps considerably.
So we're on the digital side, the technology recruitment side, but we try to put ourselves in the face. What if we were a carrier, right? What would we do? And the first thing would be to keep our promises, to make sure that we manage those expectations, that the first few months are crucial, all of their interactions with our staff, just the operations of that driver being out on the road. I think that's the biggest behavior of retention.
So, okay, that sounds great. The last question we have is, what are the traditional ways that driver recruitment has been done in the past, and how does CDL marketing differentiate itself in the sort of crowded space of driver recruiting?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people say, hey, I'm a driver recruiter, I do driver recruitment, right? It's a very buzz-friendly phrase, but you say in the past, traditional ways, you have the leased labor and the placement firms, and that's that's phasing out very quickly, and it has been. Lots of people now getting into the technology side, and really we focus on the data, offering innovative solutions. Ben, you want to touch on some of those?
Yeah, I mean, some of the big things we focus on today are user experience, candidate mobile experience. That app process has to be super easy because, just on our job board alone, cdljobnow.com, 90% of traffic comes through on mobile devices, right? So we want to make it easy to, connect with our customers' opportunity, easy to apply. You'd be surprised some of the barriers to entry, just to apply to a job online. It's crazy. As Craig said, the data, huge focus. We've got over 600,000 drivers in our network that hold a Class A license.
Wow.
That's
huge. We're on our way to 2 million.
The data,
100%.
The data allows us to be very, very effective in targeting drivers online and getting in front of drivers in a certain market. It's been massive. And then we also, have a lot of unique, innovative ways to allow our customers to target our drivers in our network, promote their open jobs.
Yeah, we have about 200 carriers in our network who are on our platform, CDL Job Now, and really our whole, slogan is battling the driver shortage and technology, or recruiting for the new era, right? Trying to get rid of those old ways of doing things and just focusing on the future of driver recruiting. So
awesome.
Fantastic.
You unfortunately went slightly
Well
over
said.
the 5
No,
minutes.
that is-
5 minutes and 11 seconds.
Are you going to give him a hard time about that?
I'm not going to give him
JP?
2, but you still get a T-shirt. It's all good.
Thank you. 11 seconds. Okay.
Yeah, well articulated.
We really appreciate
big issues. Not easy to.
We could talk about this for
summarize.
hours. By the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
Right.
I get a sense that you can. And wow, that was fun. What an interview. Those guys know their stuff. As they said, they could talk about driver retention for days.
So could we.
Yeah, and in fact we do. No, but let's transition into a topic that you might not hear as much about these days, and especially this particular interesting one that you covered. I think this is kind of cool. It's got a cool YouTube video in it as well. Tell us about LNG carriers cracking open the Northern Sea Route.
Yeah, so LNG is liquefied natural gas.
Yeah.
And it's become a more important fuel for electricity generation in the recent past because emission-wise, it's much cleaner than coal. And it's relatively easy to it's relatively easy to convert a coal plant to a natural gas
Doesn't it though?
electricity plant.
Doesn't it? Isn't it true though that lots of methane and like it's not to harvest the natural gas isn't always a clean process.
No.
Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Oh, it is correct.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought that I had.
It's like anything.
Right.
In the U.S., we get a lot of our natural gas from fracking as a byproduct of fracking. So obviously that has environmental impacts, and it's bad to
I just was curious. It's not like some perfect solution, but it is
right. It's still a fossil fuel.
Yeah,
it's still part of the oil and gas industry. It's still methane itself is still bad. Anyway,
right.
So LNG has become a more important fuel source, especially in Asia. Especially Japan used to be the biggest importer of LNG. I think it actually still is, but China has just now passed South Korea to be the second largest importer of LNG, and they're trying to control their emissions, clean up their air, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And Russia has been developing this place called the Yamal Peninsula in northern Russia that sticks up way above the Arctic Circle, has the biggest gas fields, one of the biggest gas fields in the world, not quite as big as Qatar, but it
sounds like a cool place to hang out.
I think it's extremely remote. Like, just to give you like a hint about what this place is like, it's one of the only places on Earth where people still herd. They're still nomadic herders of reindeer.
Reindeer. Yeah. I bet we have never talked about reindeer in the podcast.
It's basically Hoth.
Hoth. Yes.
Yeah, the ice planet from Empire Strikes Back.
Right. Where like Luke had to cut open the what was it?
No, Han Solo. Luke passes out. Han Solo takes his lightsaber, cuts open the tauntaun.
The tauntaun, man.
Anyway, so the Northern Sea Route basically goes through the Arctic Ocean, which is covered in ice, and
so how to penetrate?
Yeah, and so normally you have to get an ice-breaking ship to accompany you. It's basically, it costs two, so you have to arrange for two ships for every one ship of, LNG. You know what I'm saying? If they all have escorts, it's not very efficient. So most of the time, the way they get gas out of the Yamal Peninsula is either through a pipeline or rails, or the ships go westbound around Europe through the Suez Canal, which costs, can cost you, easily $400,000 in fees, and then down around India over to East Asia. But they've started going eastbound out of the Yamal Peninsula through the ice. They've built a new class of LNG carrying ships that are also ice breaking.
Sweet.
And so they can break up to 2 meters of ice, and the first two ships full of LNG have left the port and are headed to China.
How much ice are they having to break through to is it hundreds of miles? Is it just like little segments?
No, it's hundreds of miles.
Hundreds of miles
it's crazy.
of having to break ice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's an interesting solution.
Yeah, and it shaves about half they do it in half the time it would normally take. So ice breaking ships, as you can imagine, aren't very fast. They go about 6 nautical miles per hour.
Well, here's another question about it. I'm sorry, I'm kind of fascinated by this for a minute, but if once the ice is broken, does it not remain kind of broken for a while, or does it freeze right back up?
I think I don't really know, but I don't think it's an option to just have one ice breaking ship break through for the season and then just have everyone else go through that. I think it moves. It's an ocean, so it moves. Things like that.
That's fascinating. Another disruption of the seas.
And basically, what this is doing is it's a new kind of ship that is connecting some of the largest gas fields in the world to the largest consumers of gas in the world. In a cheaper, faster, more efficient way. That's the
the remote takeaway on the maritime seas. Yeah. Fun, man. What an interesting story that is. Another interesting thing is recently a report came out from the Cato Institute that explores. It's a policy analysis.
Right. So the Cato Institute is this libertarian think tank.
Yes. And they wrote a compelling analysis of something that, whatever your point of view is, I mean, overall, it's costing the vast majority of us a lot of money. The results of the Jones Act. I guess the long and short of it, the Jones Act is an antiquated law that was passed in 1920. It's known as the Jones Act. It was originally called the Merchant Marine Act, but it deals with cabotage. Have you ever heard of that word, cabotage?
I've heard of it. What is
It's
it
not
mean?
like cabbage in any way. It's cabotage, and that means the movement of water transportation between domestic ports. So
Aha.
you just learned something new, everybody, if you didn't know what cabotage was.
So, for
The
example,
movement
if
of
you-
water transportation between domestic
If-
ports.
See, if Seattle was shipping something to Anchorage, or LA was shipping something to Honolulu, or Miami was shipping something to San Juan, that would
Yes.
all be considered cabotage.
Yes, very good. You're a fast learner about this. So guess what? The U.S., because of this Jones Act from 1920, is one of the most restrictive cabotage laws of any other country in the world.
And what is it?
And because it restricts this, it requires that all goods transported by water between U.S. ports have to be carried by U.S. flagged ships only. But that's not where it stops. The ships must also be constructed in the U.S. and owned by U.S. citizens and crewed by U.S. citizens and U.S. permanent residents. Why?
Who knows?
Because of a few things that they were
So they're trying to protect the shipbuilding industry. It sounds like 1920. This is like isolationism,
protectionism. Yes, and you know what? I mean, overall, like the deregulation that happened in the 1970s and 80s for the air and the trucking.
Right. That never happened to maritime.
It never happened to maritime, and it helped. It helped these industries, but maritime was left untouched. John McCain, has long been fighting against it. He basically said, I have long advocated the repeal of the Jones Act, an archaic and burdensome law that hinders free trade, stifles the economy, and ultimately harms consumers.
Right.
It's a protectionist mentality. And if you basically, annulled it, you would have more free trade, you would expand economic growth, create more jobs, and lower costs for consumers.
Right.
But nevertheless, in spite of that, what you have is so the Jones Act is a law that is overseen by 16 congressional committees and 6 federal agencies. So, so what the deal is, why is it so hard to get this repealed?
Right.
It's because there are a well-organized few who really who get together, it's a lobbyists,
Right.
and they're well organized, and they're powerful, and their interests are at stake.
Right. Their existence is at stake almost.
Right, and whereas those who it impacts, not only does it cross over all these agencies, and there's all kinds of oversight, and it's complex, but for all of us, we don't necessarily
even know what it is,
right, or what's happening as a result.
But if you're
we don't even know.
We've heard from some readers in Hawaii though that a lot of people there kind of do know what it is, and if you're wondering why any American product you try to buy in Hawaii is way more expensive, it's because they're being forced to use U.S. constructed, owned, and crewed ships to move it out there.
Right.
I think if it probably doesn't affect most people that much because, for example, say you live in Atlanta and you order something from a company in New York, they're not going to put it on a ship, a U.S. ship, ship it down to Savannah, then move it to Atlanta. They're just going to drive it on a truck. So, I mean, it probably doesn't affect most people that much, but the government already kind of knows that it doesn't really work. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do, which is to build a robust U.S. ship industry. During the Hurricane Maria relief efforts, in when Puerto Rico was devastated by that horrible storm.
Even after that, it still took 2 days of debate before President Trump actually granted I think it was a 10-day waiver of the Jones Act.
Just 10 days?
Yes, and then they closed it back and that's it. So
wow, I thought they would have suspended it permanently. Or not permanently, but indefinitely, for hurricane relief efforts. I mean, we're talking an emergency situation.
How strong. To me, though, that's the thing that's kind of upsetting about this law that I don't see going away anytime soon. Because, first of all, it takes acts of God for them to even grant brief waivers.
Right.
So you know what it's going to require to really annul this? Something even less likely than an act of God.
What's that?
An act of Congress.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's here to stay, and it's just another dumb law. It's the government putting their thumb on the scale of the free market and trying to tip the balance in favor of something, ignoring 90 years worth of unintended consequences. Yeah. And here we are.
And I guess the last thing to say about it is why, yes, even though there's a sense of resignation that this is probably not going anywhere, as John McCain said, all I can do is appeal to the patron saint of lost causes and keep pressing and pressing. And sooner or later, you have to succeed. That's what one would hope.
Godspeed, John McCain.
Yes. And anyway, is it time for the big deal, little deal? What's the deal with you, Dill Pickle?
Here we go.
All right. Well, ready or not, here we go. JP, here we go. Tesla finally reaches Model 3 production and CFRA downgrades stock to sell. Big deal or little deal?
I'd say it's a big deal. Proud of Tesla for what all they've been able to accomplish, but all indications suggest that this level of production is not sustainable.
The truck drivers in India are angry. Big deal or little deal?
It's a big deal. It's strikingly similar to the American trucking industry, dominated by brokers, fragmented, too much patchwork of government regulations. A really interesting story by Vishnu.
Could turmoil in Iran set off the Eagle Ford shale play? Big deal or little deal?
It's a pretty big deal. Our government seems to be pretty belligerent toward Iran. There seems to be a fair amount of socio-political turmoil, and who knows what happens to oil markets if their production drops off.
US DOT announces pilot program to allow under 21 drivers with military CDL. Big deal or little deal?
I think the pilot program is a little deal, but to the extent that they can now collect data on these young drivers and try to prove that they aren't as unsafe as people think, it could be a big deal.
Kind of hedging your bets there.
July economic roundup. Tariffs take center stage. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. First, the economy is a big deal, but it's consumer spending and business investment is up, and freight remains strong. So check out the trends and what to watch in Ibrahim's piece.
Citing freight costs and declining sales, General Mills cuts 625 jobs. Big deal or little deal?
It's a big deal because freight costs are getting real, and this is impacting jobs and human lives, and they're not able to get ahead of this right now.
UIDA request for a small business ELD exemption gets thumbs down from the FMCSA. Big deal or little deal?
Gotta say little deal. I mean, they didn't get the exemption for small carriers, which would have been most of UIDA's constituency. Can't see how the FMCSA would have approved this.
Rolling Strong and Enrollment First partner to prioritize drivers. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. Gamifying healthy behavior for driver wellness doubles down with the partnership. It's all about driver retention on this podcast, baby. And I don't care that we went over 2 minutes, Silent Barry. I don't care, man. We're getting the news in.
We're champions of life.
All right.
Just like Bush Jones said.
That makes us batting 500. We're 2 for 4.
Okay.
Out of the 8 headlines in 2 minutes.
It's good enough for a Hall of Fame career.
And that'll do it for the big stories this week. As always, we go into more detail about each of the topics we've talked about today on our website, FreightWaves.com. We will continue to publish this podcast weekly, so be sure to subscribe to What the Truck on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, make sure to leave us a review to let us know what you think of our new podcast.
And if you're interested in freight economics and finance, come to our Market Waves conference at the Gaylord Texan Resort and Convention Center in Grapevine, Texas this November. Visit marketwaves18.com to learn more about this event.
That'll do it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week on What the Truck.